The alarm screamed in Jake Morris's ears as his cargo freighter tore through Velara's atmosphere like a meteor. Warning lights painted the cockpit red, hull integrity failing. Navigation offline, he gripped the controls with white knuckles, fighting against the pull of gravity that wanted to smash him into the planet's surface. He didn't remember entering this star system. One moment he'd been running a standard supply route to the outer colonies. The next his instruments went haywire and something yanked him out of hyperspace. Now he was going down hard on a world that wasn't even on his charts. The ship hit ground with a bone-jarring crash that threw Jake against his harness. Metal shrieked and tore. The viewport shattered into a spider web of cracks. Then, everything went dark and silent, except for the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the hammer of his own heartbeat. Jake unbuckled with shaking hands and stumbled toward the emergency hatch. His ribs ached. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye. He slammed the release, and the hatch blew outward with a pressurized gasp. Sunlight hit him like a physical force. He squinted against the glare and stepped out onto alien soil. The landscape took his breath away. Crystalline spires jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, catching the light of twin suns and throwing rainbows across fields of silver grass. In the distance, massive structures rose toward the sky, their architecture so alien and graceful they seemed to grow rather than be built. Then he saw them. 20 figures emerged from the crystal formations, moving with an unsettling, fluid grace. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with segmented bodies covered in what looked like natural armor that shifted colors from deep purple to brilliant green. Their faces were angular and sharp, with multifaceted eyes that caught the light like gems. Each carried a weapon that hummed with energy. Jake raised his hands slowly. His sidearm was still in the ship and wouldn't do him any good against 20 armed hostiles anyway. The figures surrounded him in a perfect circle. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, armor gleaming like polished obsidian. When it spoke, the words came through a translator device that rendered them in flat, emotionless English. "You have violated sacred ground, human. The Queen will decide your fate." Before Jake could respond, 2 guards seized his arms with grips like steel. They moved him forward with no room for resistance. His boots crunched on the crystalline soil as they marched him toward the distant city. The walk took an hour. Jake's mind raced the entire time, trying to figure out what happened to his ship, where he was, and how he was going to get out of this. The Velarans, if that's what they were called, said nothing. They just marched in formation like a military escort. The city was even more impressive up close. The structures spiraled upward in impossible geometries, connected by bridges that seemed to float without support. Velarans moved through the streets, stopping to watch the procession with those unsettling, multifaceted eyes. Jake felt like a prize being paraded to the gallows. They brought him to the largest structure at the city's heart, a palace that looked like it had been grown from a single massive crystal. Inside, the halls were cool and dim, lit by bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in the walls. The guards led him to a vast throne room where hundreds of Velarans stood in silent assembly. At the far end, on a throne of twisted metal and living vines, sat the Queen. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Her armor was silver and gold, inlaid with patterns that seemed to move when Jake looked at them directly. A crown of crystalline spikes rose from her head, and her eyes, larger and more complex than the others, fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The guards forced Jake to his knees. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the steps with measured grace. When she spoke, her voice came through the translator, cold and clear as ice. "I am Queen Azira of Velara. You are Jake Morris, pilot of the human vessel Frontier Dream. You have crashed on the sacred plateau, ground where no outsider may tread. This violation creates a debt that must be repaid." Jake's throat was dry. It was an accident. My ship malfunctioned. I didn't mean to violate anything. Intent is irrelevant. The debt exists. Azira circled him slowly, studying him like a specimen. "Among my people, there are 3 ways to repay a life debt of this magnitude: death, servitude, or marriage." The last word hit Jake like a punch to the gut. "What? You will marry me, human?" It is the only acceptable resolution. Laughter burst from Jake before he could stop it. The absurdity was too much. You're joking. This is some kind of test, right? Azira's expression didn't change. I do not joke about matters of debt and honor. You will remain here. You will undergo the bonding ceremony. You will become my consort, and the alliance between our peoples will be sealed. I didn't agree to any of this. Jake surged to his feet, but the guards slammed him back down. You can't just kidnap someone and force them into marriage because they crashed on your planet. I can and I have. Azira gestured and the guards hauled Jake upright. Take him to the eastern wing. He will be prepared for the ceremony. Wait! My ship. I need to repair it and contact my people. Your ship is being dismantled for study. You have no people here. You have only your debt and the choice of how to pay it. Azira turned away, dismissing him. Choose wisely, Jake Morris. My patience has limits. The guards dragged him from the throne room despite his protests. They took him through winding corridors to a suite of rooms that were beautiful and sterile as a museum. The door sealed behind him with a hiss that sounded far too much like a prison cell locking. Jake paced the room like a caged animal, his mind spinning. This was insane. He'd crashed on an alien planet, and now their queen was demanding he marry her to pay some made-up debt. There had to be a way out. There had to be. He spent the next hour searching the rooms for any means of escape or communication. Nothing. The windows were sealed. The door wouldn't budge. His personal comm device had been taken, along with everything else he'd been carrying. A panel in the wall chimed and slid open to reveal a Velaran servant carrying a tray of what might have been food. The creature set it down without a word, and left before Jake could ask any questions. He stared at the alien meal, stomach growling despite everything. The food looked safe enough, similar to fruits and grains he recognized from other worlds. He ate slowly, trying to think through his options. Hours passed. The twin suns set beyond the sealed windows, casting the room in twilight. Jake was starting to doze when the door suddenly opened. Queen Azira stood in the entrance, alone this time, without guards or weapons. In the dim light, she looked less like a monarch and more like a person. The realization caught Jake off guard. We need to talk, she said, stepping inside. The door sealed behind her. Jake stood slowly. I'm not marrying you. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Azira moved to the window, her reflection ghostly in the crystal. My people are dying, Jake Morris. Our planet's core is cooling. Our resources are depleting faster than we can replenish them. In 50 years, maybe less, Velara will be uninhabitable. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What does that have to do with me? Humanity is expanding through the galaxy at an unprecedented rate. You have the technology, the resources, the numbers we lack. We need an alliance. We need trade, support, a bridge between our species. She turned to face him. And my nobles will never agree to it unless they believe humans can be trusted, unless they see one bound to us by the most sacred ties we have. So you're using me as a political prop. I'm using you as a symbol of hope. Azira's voice remained flat through the translator, but something in her posture shifted. I sabotaged your ship, Jake Morris. I pulled you from hyperspace and damaged your systems to force you here. I needed a human. And fate or luck brought you into range. The admission hit harder than Jake expected. You destroyed my ship. You kidnapped me. And now you're telling me it's all for some propaganda stunt to convince your people to play nice with humans. It's more than propaganda. It's survival. For both our peoples. Azira stepped closer. Your government doesn't know we exist yet, but they will soon. We occupy systems along your expansion route. When contact happens, it will either be through diplomacy or through war. I'm choosing diplomacy. By forcing me into marriage. By offering you a choice between species-wide conflict and a personal sacrifice. Azira's eyes reflected the starlight like prisms. I'm not asking you to love me, Jake Morris. I'm asking you to be a bridge. Help me convince my people that humans can be partners instead of invaders. Help me secure the alliance we need to save our world. In return, you'll have status, resources, and the knowledge that you prevented a war before it could begin. Jake wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to escape, to reject this manipulation. But the logic was brutal and clear. If what she said was true, if Velara really did sit in humanity's path, then first contact would happen whether he liked it or not. And first contacts had a nasty habit of going wrong. What if I refuse? He asked quietly. Then I'll find another human. Your species isn't hard to track once we know where to look. Azira tilted her head. But it will take time. Time we don't have. Time that might run out before I can prevent the war faction from seizing control. War faction? You think all my people support this plan? Half my nobles want to militarize to take what we need from human colonies by force before you grow too strong. They see your crash as an insult, proof of human carelessness and disrespect. They're already calling for your execution. Azira moved back toward the door. The bonding ceremony is in 3 days. Use that time to decide if you want to be a corpse or a catalyst. Either way, something will change. She left without waiting for a response. Jake stood in the empty room, his mind a storm of anger and fear and reluctant understanding. He'd been used, manipulated, trapped in a situation he never asked for. But refusing out of pride might condemn thousands to a war that didn't need to happen. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Jake was escorted to a different part of the palace by guards who watched him like he might bolt at any moment. They brought him to a library, a vast chamber filled with crystalline data storage units that hummed with energy. An elderly Velaran waited there, its armor dulled with age but its eyes still sharp. I am Scholar Verith, the translator rendered. Queen Azira has asked me to educate you on our culture, so you do not embarrass yourself or her during the ceremony. The lessons were grueling. Verath drilled Jake on Velaran customs, history, and protocol with the patience of stone and the expectations of a drill sergeant. He learned that Velarans valued honor above all else, that debts were considered sacred bonds more important than blood, that their entire society was built on a complex web of obligation and reciprocity. He also learned that many Velarans viewed other species as inferior, that contact with outsiders was rare and usually hostile, that the faction opposing Azira was larger and more powerful than she'd let on. On the second day, Jake met some of them. He was being escorted back to his quarters when a group of Velaran nobles blocked the corridor. Their armor was dark red and black, militant and aggressive. The leader stepped forward, towering over Jake with obvious contempt. So this is the creature our queen would bind herself to. Pathetic. The noble's voice dripped with scorn even through the translator's flat tone. Soft skin, weak frame, no natural defenses. Your kind are parasites, spreading through the galaxy like disease. Jake met the noble's multifaceted gaze without flinching. I was going to say the same thing about pompous aliens who judge people they've never met. The insult registered. The noble's mandibles clicked in anger, and its hand moved toward a weapon. But before violence could erupt, another voice cut through the tension. Stand down, Lord Craven. Azira appeared at the corridor's end with a full escort of guards. She moved between Jake and the nobles with the authority of absolute command. Threatening my consort is the same as threatening me. I suggest you remember that, before you do something that requires me to remind you of the consequences. Craven held his ground for a moment, hatred radiating from every line of his body. Then he stepped back with visible effort. This union is a mistake, my queen. It will weaken us, not strengthen us. When your folly becomes clear, we will be ready to correct it. He turned and left with his followers, but the threat hung in the air like poison. Azira didn't relax until they were gone. Then she turned to Jake with what might have been concern. You shouldn't provoke them. Craven leads the war faction. He'd kill you without hesitation if he thought he could get away with it. Maybe he should try. Might solve both our problems. Jake's voice was bitter. You don't mean that, don't I? I'm trapped here being used as a pawn in your political game. Maybe dying would be simpler. Azira was silent for a long moment. Then she dismissed the guards with a gesture. When they were alone, she spoke without the translator's assistance. Her natural voice a series of clicks and harmonics that shouldn't have made sense but somehow conveyed meaning Jake could almost understand. She switched back to the translator. I was 12 cycles old when I became queen. My mother was assassinated by nobles who thought they could control a child. I survived by being harder, smarter, and more ruthless than they expected. I've spent 30 cycles fighting to hold this throne against enemies inside and outside my court. I don't have the luxury of making decisions based on kindness or fairness. I do what I must to protect my people, even when it means making choices that haunt me. Jake studied her, seeing past the armor and the crown for the first time. You're scared. I'm terrified. The admission was quiet. If I fail, Craven will take the throne and lead us to war. Thousands, maybe millions will die. Both our species will suffer. And it will be because I wasn't strong enough or clever enough to prevent it. So you grabbed the first human you could find and decided to force a political marriage. Great plan. It's the only plan I have left. Azira's shoulders sagged slightly, a gesture so human it shocked Jake. The ceremony is tomorrow. If you truly want to refuse, I won't stop you. I'll find another way, or I'll fail trying. But I'm asking you one more time to consider what's at stake. Not for me, for everyone who'll die if we get this wrong. She left him standing in the corridor, alone with thoughts that refused to settle. That night, Jake barely slept. He kept replaying Azira's words, Craven's threats, the weight of a choice he never should have had to make. When dawn broke over Velara's crystal spires, he still didn't know what he was going to do. Guards came for him, as the twin suns climbed the sky. They dressed him in formal attire that was surprisingly human-compatible. Deep blue fabric with silver threading that caught the light. A ceremonial sash marked with Velaran symbols completed the outfit. They led him through the palace to a massive outdoor arena where thousands of Velarans had gathered. The crowd's reaction to his appearance was mixed. Some curious, some hostile, many simply cold and watching. At the arena's center, on a platform of polished crystal, stood Queen Azira in full ceremonial regalia. Her armor gleamed like captured starlight. Her crown had been replaced by an intricate headdress of precious metals and living vines that seemed to glow from within. Jake was brought to stand across from her. The crowd fell silent. Azira spoke first, her voice amplified across the arena. We gather to witness the bonding of debt and honor. Jake Morris of humanity crashed upon our sacred ground and created an obligation that must be fulfilled. Today, that debt is transformed into alliance through the sacred bond of marriage. A priest stepped forward, an ancient Velaran whose armor was white as bone. It began to chant in the old language, words that predated the translator technology. The meaning was lost on Jake, but the weight of tradition was palpable. The ceremony proceeded through rituals Jake barely understood. Exchange of ceremonial items, promises spoken in both languages, the tying of colored cords that symbolized the joining of two lives. Throughout it all, Jake felt the crowd's tension. He could see Craven and his faction watching with barely concealed rage. Could see other nobles uncertain and wary. Could see common Velarans confused about what this meant for their future. When the priest asked for Jake's final vow, the one that would seal the bond, the entire arena seemed to hold its breath. Jake looked at Azira, saw her standing rigid and regal, hiding whatever fear or doubt she felt beneath layers of royal composure. Saw a leader, trying desperately to save her people the only way she knew how. He thought about his own people, expanding through the stars with optimism and arrogance in equal measure. Thought about the wars that would come if this failed. Thought about all the lives hanging on his next words. Then he thought about choice. Real choice, not the illusion of it. The explosion cut him off. The platform erupted in fire and force that threw Jake backward. His ears rang. Smoke and debris filled the air. Screams echoed through the arena as the crowd panicked. Jake rolled to his knees, vision swimming. Through the chaos, he saw figures in dark armor rushing the platform. Craven's faction. This wasn't just opposition, this was a coup. Azira was on the ground, her ceremonial armor cracked and leaking fluid that might have been blood. Guards were fighting the attackers, but more kept coming, pouring into the arena from hidden entrances. Jake didn't think. He lunged toward Azira, grabbing her arm and hauling her upright. "Can you move?" Barely. Her voice was pained even through the translator. "This is what I feared. Craven has made his move. Energy blasts tore through the air around them. Jake pulled Azira behind a chunk of debris as return fire from her loyal guards lit up the arena. This was bad. This was a full military assault disguised as an assassination. We need to get you out of here. Jake looked around desperately for an escape route. No. Azira gripped his arm with surprising strength. If I run, I lose. The throne, my people's future, everything. I have to fight. You're injured! Then fight with me. She pulled a weapon from her damaged armor and checked its charge. Show Craven that humans don't flee. Show my people that our alliance has teeth. Jake stared at her. This was insane. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier. He had no armor, no weapons, no training for this kind of combat. But he'd made a choice when he caught her. Maybe he'd made it the moment he decided not to look away from the weight of what was at stake. I need a weapon. Azira's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. She pulled a second pistol from her belt and tossed it to him. Try not to shoot any of my guards. The weapon was heavier than human designs, but the grip was intuitive enough. Jake checked the charge like she had. Muscle memory from basic training he'd barely paid attention to years ago, suddenly vital and present. How do we do this? He asked. We survive until reinforcements arrive. Or we die trying. Azira pulled herself fully upright, armor damaged but stance defiant. Welcome to Velaran politics, Jake Morris. Then she stepped out of cover and opened fire. Jake followed on instinct, his weapon tracking targets with adrenaline-sharpened focus. The arena had become a war zone. Craven's forces were trying to push toward the platform while Azira's guards fought to hold them back. Civilians fled in panic, adding to the chaos. Jake had never been in real combat before. The closest he'd come was a bar fight on a mining station that ended with everyone too drunk to throw straight punches. This was different. This was chaos and violence and the very real possibility of death with every breath. But it was also terrifyingly simple. See target. Aim. Fire. Move. Don't think about the lives ending with each shot. Don't think about anything except the next second of survival. He and Azira fought back to back, their weapons lighting up the smoke-filled air. She moved with practiced efficiency despite her injuries, each shot precise and deadly. Jake was sloppier, relying more on volume of fire than accuracy. But between them they held their small piece of ground. A massive Velaran in heavy assault armor charged their position. Jake's weapon barely scratched its defenses. Azira shifted her aim and fired 3 shots in rapid succession at what must have been weak points. The attacker went down hard. Behind! Jake shouted, spinning to target rebels trying to flank them. His shots drove them back into cover. The command center! Azira pointed toward a fortified structure at the arena's edge. If we can reach it, I can call in the full palace guard. We're holding with only ceremonial escorts. My real forces don't even know we're under attack. That's across the entire arena through an army of people trying to kill us. Do you have a better plan? Jake didn't. Stay close. They moved together, using debris and fallen structures as cover. The battle raged around them in a symphony of weapon fire and screaming. Jake's heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst. Fear and adrenaline mixed into a cocktail that sharpened everything to razor clarity. Halfway to the command center, they ran into Craven himself. The rebel lord stood on a raised platform, his personal guard forming a barrier around him. When he saw Azira, his mandibles spread in triumph. You should have stayed down, my queen. Your weakness has doomed our people. Now I will correct your mistakes. Craven raised a massive weapon, something that hummed with enough energy to turn Azira to ash. His finger moved toward the trigger. Jake didn't remember moving. One moment he was crouched behind cover. The next he was sprinting toward Craven with his weapon firing wildly. The shots went wide, but they served their purpose, breaking Craven's focus for a critical second. The rebel lord's weapon discharged, but the shot missed high, tearing through where Azira had been standing. Jake slammed into Craven with all the force his human frame could muster. It was like hitting a wall. Craven barely moved, his armored mass absorbing the impact easily. But Jake had gotten inside his guard, too close for the heavy weapon to track. He jammed his pistol against what looked like a joint in the armor, and fired point blank. Craven screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and backhanded Jake with enough force to send him flying. Jake hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His weapon clattered away. Stars exploded across his vision. Through the haze he saw Craven recovering, saw the massive alien raising his weapon again. This time the shot wouldn't miss. Then Azira was there, moving like liquid lightning despite her injuries. She didn't have a clear shot. Craven's guards were in the way and her weapon's charge was nearly depleted, so instead she threw it with all her strength at the heavy weapon's power core. The impact was perfect. The weapon overloaded and exploded in Craven's hands, the blast tearing through his armor and throwing him backward. His guards scattered, their formation broken by the sudden violence. Azira grabbed Jake and hauled him upright. "Move!" They ran while Craven's forces were still reeling. Jake's ribs screamed with pain from the hit, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Behind them, Craven's roar of fury shook the arena. They reached the command center, and Azira slammed her palm against the security panel. The door recognized her and opened just wide enough for them to slip through before sealing again. Inside was quieter, insulated from the battle's chaos. Azira moved to a communication console and began entering commands with desperate speed. Her injuries were worse than Jake had realized. She was leaving trails of luminescent blood on the controls. "Sit down before you pass out," Jake said, moving to support her. "After I call reinforcements." Her fingers flew across the alien interface. Almost there. The console lit up green. Azira spoke rapidly in her native language, issuing what sounded like emergency orders. When she finished, she finally allowed herself to slump against Jake's supporting grip. "Help is coming. 10 minutes, maybe less. We just have to survive until then." The command center door shuddered under an impact. Then another. Craven's forces had recovered and were trying to break through. Jake looked around desperately. The room was designed for communication, not defense. There were no weapons, no secondary exits, nothing but consoles and the rapidly failing door. "We're trapped," he said. "Yes." Azira managed to push herself upright again. "Which means we make our stand here." The door was bowing inward now, the metal screaming under repeated impacts. Jake could hear Craven's voice on the other side, promising death and vengeance. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this," Azira said quietly. "You deserved better than to die in a war that isn't yours." Jake laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "Funny thing is, I was going to say yes to the marriage right before the explosion. I decided that preventing a war was worth the sacrifice." Azira turned to look at him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "Why? Because you were right. Because someone has to be brave enough to build bridges instead of walls. Because I've been running cargo routes my whole life, and this is the first time I've had a chance to actually matter." He picked up a piece of broken equipment, weighing it as a makeshift weapon. "Guess I won't get the chance now." Jake Morris. Azira straightened fully, her royal bearing returning despite the pain and blood. "If we survive the next 10 minutes, I promise you that our marriage will be a true partnership, not a political arrangement, not a symbol. A choice we both make freely. Big if, then let's make it happen." The door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Craven's forces poured through the gap, weapons raised and ready. Jake and Azira stood together, unarmed and injured but refusing to fall without a fight. The rebels advanced with weapons charged and victory in their eyes. Then the walls exploded. Not from rebel weapons, but from above. As heavily armored palace guards dropped through the ceiling on rappel lines, they hit the ground firing, their weapons cutting through Craven's forces with brutal efficiency. More guards poured through the shattered door, pushing the rebels back with overwhelming force. Within seconds the tide had turned. Craven's forces broke and ran, their coup collapsing as the full might of the palace guard descended on them. Jake and Azira stood in the center of the chaos, protected by a wall of loyal soldiers. The Queen's emergency call had worked. Reinforcements had arrived just in time. A guard captain approached and saluted. "My Queen, Lord Craven is fleeing toward the Eastern District. Do we pursue?" "Yes. I want him alive to face justice." Azira's voice was steady despite her injuries. "Secure the arena, treat the wounded. and find out how many nobles were part of this coup. I want names." The captain saluted again and began issuing orders. The guards moved with professional precision, transforming chaos back into order. Medics arrived and insisted on treating Azira immediately. She finally allowed them to lead her to a medical station, but not before gripping Jake's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Jake squeezed back. "We're not done yet." The aftermath took hours to sort through. The casualty count was brutal. Dozens dead, hundreds injured, and the arena itself would need months of repair. But the coup had failed. Craven and his key supporters had been captured trying to flee the city. The war faction's leadership was broken. Jake received treatment for his injuries, 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising, and a concussion. The Velaran medics worked efficiently. Their medicine advanced enough that he'd be mostly healed within days rather than weeks. When he was finally released from the medical bay, he found Azira waiting. She had been patched up as well, her armor replaced by simpler clothing that was almost casual by Velaran standards. "Walk with me," she said. They moved through the palace gardens, a space of engineered beauty where bioluminescent plants created patterns of living light in the gathering darkness. The twin suns had set, and Velara's 3 moons were rising, casting the world in silver. Craven confessed everything, Azira said as they walked. "The coup was planned for months. He was going to kill me during the ceremony and claim I died heroically defending against a human attack. Then he'd use that to justify declaring war on your colonies." Jake felt cold despite the warm night air. "How many nobles were involved?" "Too many. Nearly half the High Court." Azira's voice was tired. "I knew I had enemies, but I didn't realize how deep the rot went. If the ceremony had proceeded normally, if there'd been no attack, Craven would have waited and struck when I was weakened by political opposition to the marriage. Either way, I was meant to die." "But you didn't." "No, because you fought beside me when you had every reason to run. Because you saved my life when any sane person would have let the aliens sort out their own mess." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "The marriage ceremony was interrupted. By our laws, it's incomplete. You could walk away now. I could assign you a ship and send you back to human space. No debt, no obligation. Just my gratitude and a chance to go home." Jake looked up at the unfamiliar stars, thinking about his old life, running cargo routes, sleeping in cramped quarters, the comfortable monotony of knowing exactly what each day would bring. Then he thought about Azira's desperate gamble to save her people, thought about standing back to back in the arena, fighting for something that actually mattered, thought about the bridge between species that still needed building. "Do you still need a consort?" he asked. "Yes, more than ever. With half my court in chains, I need to show strength and stability. I need to prove that the alliance with humanity is real and beneficial." Azira's multifaceted eyes studied him carefully. "But I meant what I said. If we do this, it will be as equals. Partners. Not captive and captor. I have conditions. Name them. I want to contact my people. Let them know I'm alive and safe. I don't want anyone thinking I was killed or kidnapped." Jake held up a hand as Azira started to object. "I'll explain the situation honestly. Tell them about the alliance you're building, but they deserve to know." "Agreed. What else?" "I want a real role, not just a ceremonial position. If I'm going to be here, I want to actually help. Bridge building goes both ways. There must be ways I can make myself useful beyond just standing next to you at official functions." Azira's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was amusement. "You fought off a coup attempt and helped save my throne. I think we can find you meaningful work. Then yes, let's finish what we started." They completed the bonding ceremony 3 days later, this time in the palace's private chambers, with only essential witnesses. No crowds, no public spectacle, just the ancient words and the binding of cords, and 2 people choosing to build something new from the wreckage of catastrophe. When it was done, Queen Azira and consort Jake Morris stood before the remaining noble court and announced the formal alliance between Velara and humanity. The announcement was met with mixed reactions, but the opposition was muted. Craven's failed coup had broken the war faction's power, and the nobles who remained were more interested in survival than ideology. Jake sent his message to human space that same day. A carefully worded explanation of his crash, his survival, and the unexpected alliance he'd helped forge. He didn't hide the manipulation that had brought him here, but he also made clear that his choice to stay was genuine. The response, when it came weeks later, was cautiously optimistic. Humanity's expansion councils were intrigued by the possibility of peaceful contact with an established alien civilization. Diplomatic channels opened. Trade discussions began. The bridge started to take shape. 6 months later, Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City, watching human transport ships descend through Velara's atmosphere. They carried supplies, technology, and the first wave of ambassadors. The alliance was becoming real, transforming from desperate gamble into working partnership. Azira joined him, moving with the easy familiarity they developed through months of working side by side. The formal distance between them had gradually given way to something more genuine. Not love, not yet, but the foundations of respect and trust that might grow into it. "Your people bring hope," she said, watching the ships land. "Our people," Jake corrected. "I'm Velaran now too, remember? You made it official." Her mandibles clicked in amusement. "So I did. How does it feel, being the first human to marry an alien queen? Terrifying." "Right," Jake smiled. "Ask me again in a year, and I might have a better answer. I'll hold you to that." They stood together as the twin suns set over Val.